The last movie I have for you guys is a documentary, and that is called Are We Good? And it's by Stephen Feinartz, who I believe is a longtime friend and associate of Marc Maron. And if you don't know Marc Maron, probably most famous now for his podcast, and I can't say the actual name, I'll just say WTF. You probably know what the is. But WTF podcast was one of the early podcasts in the podcast game. And I used to listen to it pretty consistently. I mean, obviously we're on a podcast. We are all aware of podcasts, and the Film Vault was something we're all linked to. And that's been around about as long as, probably actually as long as what WTF has been around. And both of them are in that ground floor level of podcasts. The only other one I listen to consistently that's from that era is TBTL, Too Beautiful to Live, which is on like episode 4,500, something like that. They've been around forever from the Seattle area. They've become more ubiquitous than that. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they're another long going one. And they're a podcast that comes out every day of the week, which is crazy. All right. WTF, Marc Maron. He never got the level of money or fame quite as like a Joe Rogan, but he's also become one of the most respected and long going interview kind of style of podcast that has existed. And of course, the height, I guess, would be he interviewed Barack Obama in his little garage at some point. Also, Marc Maron, of course, the longtime stand-up comedian. And he also worked for a little while with Air America, which is a liberal version of kind of the Fox News radio sort of stuff, but in the liberal side of things. So he's got quite a pedigree, and he's acted in quite a few things too. Very curmudgeonly, he's got cross between not quite Lewis Black anger comic kind of a guy, but like a grumpy, cynical, humorous, observational, just day in his life, introspective. He has that kind of combination of kind of the insecurities of his own personal life and being very confessional, but also being a little bit angry at the world and prickly and hard to come too close to, a little bit guarded in that way. So what is this approach? This is not a by the numbers documentary. He doesn't start in the early days and work his way slowly up to where he is now. This is more of a overall, where is he at a certain time, with sprinkling in some of the history to get some overall perspective on who he is and what he's done. And you're really more like hanging out with him in this post-pandemic, like just the end of the pandemic and the beginning of non-pandemic times, when he's trying to dip his feet back into the world of stand-up comedy and kind of coming out to the world again and seeing if he can still do it. In about 2020, it's about that time period. So the basic setup is you're following him as he's doing stand-up again. But like I said, it's very free for him. It crosses back and forth between just talking to him in his everyday life, talking to friends of his here and there, other comedians, seeing some archival stuff of him that kind of interacts with whatever subject he's talking about in the current, quote, 2020 period. And over all of that kind of looms the specter of the death of Lynn Shelton. And if you don't know Lynn Shelton, she's pretty famous. She's a filmmaker and writer that really gained some prominence. She came out of Seattle originally and worked her way into Hollywood. And if you look up her credits, you'll see she's done a lot of things that you probably recognize. But she was not a huge star or a name yet, but she probably would have been by now if she hadn't have died. And she died very young, 50-something. But she essentially kindled up a relationship with Marc. And Marc has had a really rocky relationship with women, and he's had a relationship with drugs that has had a lot of problems. He's had a very tumultuous life. He knows that he's very hard to live with, and for that reason, I think he's been married a couple times before he ended up with Lynn Shelton. And he's had various girlfriends, and it's always been in and out of his stand-up and in and out of his podcast. You would hear about these relationships. And this one seemed to be one that was sticking. It seemed to be like he was really infatuated and really in love and really like probably better for being with Lynn Shelton. And for whatever reason, she really found herself drawn to him. And they seemed to just have found their person, both in their 50s. they had found their person. And tragically, very quickly during the pandemic, not because of COVID, she actually had this blood cancer that was super acute and caused her to die like very quickly, like almost unexpectedly. Unlike the slow wasting away you get with cancer all the time, this particular blood type that she had, I didn't look up the actual name of it, killed her super quick. So of course he's devastated by that. So everything you see in this movie is shaded by that experience. And even though when the time this is being filmed, she's passed for a few years at that point, it seems like it's still pretty raw with him. It's in his stand-up because, of course, part of his stand-up is just talking about his life. Even part of his podcast, if you ever listened to it, a lot of people have, but some people maybe haven't. His podcast essentially is about an hour long. He has someone he's interviewing, like, say, Robin Williams. He famously did Robin Williams. So maybe he'll have a 45-minute interview with Robin Williams, but the first 15 minutes is just Mark talking about whatever's going on in his life right then. It's super neurotic, super introspective, super rambling. It's just him, raw nerve person. And then he has the interview. Well, in that sense, you can see how there's no way that his crushing loss of Lynn Shelton wouldn't affect his stand-up too. And it's always back and forth between him figuring out, like, is this just absolutely, me taking apart pieces of her death and using it for my entertainment and for my job? Or is this something that's real? Really looking at that, but also owning it. And I don't want to think this documentary seem like a bummer. It's not. It's everything you either love or don't love about Marc Maron. I really quite like Marc Maron, so for me, this is just a perfect version of the documentary you'd want. You don't want it to be this linear thing. You don't want it to be the paint by numbers, like, and this year he did this, and this year he did this, and now we're finally up to the present. It's much more of like how his mind would work. He's thinking about one thing, and that reminds you of something else, so you go off into that corner. And then when that reminds you of something else, you go off into that corner. It's very much more organic feeling, and it seems much more like the way his thoughts would work, and it just lets that be. But like I said, it always goes back to Lynn Shelton and how that has affected him. And I think that's super relatable for anybody. Like most people, unless you're super young or super lucky, has lost somebody very important to their lives, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a person you were in love with, whoever that might be. You've lost someone and had that great sadness in your life. And how do you keep going forward day to day, doing the mundane things in life when you have this huge thing that happened to you, this huge loss? And it's almost surreal. Like you have that and you have to still live in the world. And you're just seeing him do it in real time in this movie. There's some great moments. I won't ruin them, but there's some great moments where things happen that remind him of her. Like in the moment as they're just talking, he's just talking to the filmmaker, what was his name again? Stephen Feinartz. And he's just immediately back in that mental place. And you see it, and I think it's pretty affecting. It's a great introduction to people who haven't seen him to understand what he's all about. And if you have seen him, I think you're going to feel right at home, and you're going to appreciate the kind of look behind the scenes. There's that feeling here too of, oh, that's what the garage looks like. Or, oh, that totally makes sense. I can see that's what Marc Maron's house looks like, or whatever it is. There's that kind of stuff too. Pretty good, solid documentary. I would say I'm going to go 4 stars. 4 stars in Are We Good? Mostly because it doesn't like take me to a place that's absolutely unimaginable or just open a world up to me in a way I've never seen before. But it does what I wanted to do, and it does it really well. So that's 4 stars for Are We Good?
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews